So are hand traps really worth playing right now? And if so, which ones should you play? Realistically, hand traps will always be played because modern decks are slowly but surely turning into one-card combo decks. This means there's always space for hand traps, board breakers, or just more extenders. But again, certain decks would prefer playing just more hand traps because it fits their decks way better. And certain hand traps even completely outclass certain board breakers depending on the matchup. So let's get right into it, shall we? As soon as you smash the like and subscribe button. My man, you're the best, I really appreciate you. Anyways, first things first, I kind of want to start with a tie between a bunch of hand traps I'm not a really big fan of. I'm talking about Ghost Bell and Phantasme. Let's cut the bullshit, Ghost Bell kinda sucks. Sure, it's decent against Labyrinth because it negates that one big welcome Labyrinth, but if you're seriously dedicating 3 slots in your side deck just to negate one card that is being played by one deck that's not even that popular, something is wrong somewhere. And sure, you can justify it by saying that it negates Mathmech Superfactorial and Tri-Brigade Revolt, but nobody plays those decks. Like, you're better off playing DD Crows and Bestials at this point. And also, the Labyrinth deck is really losing a lot in popularity because the Unchained matchup is really bad. So that's why you really have to be aware of meta trends and always have to change and adapt your side deck in consequence. Now, moving on to Phantasme, I don't really like it for a wide variety of reasons. First of all, you cannot main deck Phantasme because it's dead against every deck that doesn't special summon Link monsters. And second, it doesn't hurt your opponent, but it does turn on triple tactic talents and thrust. Like the nasty effect of thrust that allows you to use your normal spell card right away. Unfortunately, Phantasme is just no longer the card it used to be back in 2019, although it does have some niche applications. The card doesn't suck, but there is a good reason why it's that low on the list. Anyways, next up are 2 hand traps that used to be way better not that long ago. I am talking about Nibiru and Droll and Logbird. These hand traps are particularly good against combo decks, but usually not really good against control or even mid-range decks. Unchained is a mid-range deck that only really needs to search one time, so Droll is pretty much useless against them. And to be fair, most of their 2-card combos pretty much play around Nibiru anyways, so it's not like you can say it's that good. As for tier elements, the deck obviously cannot lose to Nibiru for slightly obvious reasons, and Droll is kind of like a gamble. Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it just doesn't do enough, it depends. But I can say this, Droll is extremely good in the side deck because at least you have more control over when you want to play it against a certain deck or not. And if you do side it against Flunderies, just pray to God that they don't have Shifter. The worst feeling is when they have Shifter and then you just cannot use that Droll because it has to send itself to the graveyard as a cost. That happened to me in the past. But again, Droll remains a good card to side deck and potentially maybe main deck in the near future. As for Nibiru, yeah, go ahead and play it if you have a good game plan. But are you just trying to generically side Nibiru against everyone? Like, is it even that good anymore? Look, I always say the same thing. Nibiru isn't really good against any deck in particular, but rather against certain players. Sometimes it's actually the player that plays into Nibiru and not really the deck because it can definitely play around Nibiru if it really wants to. So it's the kind of card that is kind of bad on paper, but sometimes good in practice. But then again, you got some exceptions like Salamangreat, which literally cannot play around Nibiru regardless of how hard it tries. So you'll have to be aware of what people choose to play in the format and, again, make your decisions based on that. But as always, I am skeptical of the card because it becomes kind of bad in Top Cut. Anyways, next up is Skullmeister. This card sucks against pretty much everything except Unchained. As a matter of fact, against Unchained, it's pretty much just 3 additional copies of Ash, but that isn't once per turn. But then again, I recommend playing board breakers over these hand traps overall because at least you're dodging triple tactic talents and thrust. So yeah, the card doesn't necessarily suck per se, but it's just not really good enough because of the context. Anyways, now I have to talk about Ghost Reaper. The card is actually one of the most impactful hand traps that you can play if you have the extra deck to cover a lot of ground. It definitely has the potential to be game-ending against the right deck, but at the same time, almost no deck can really afford the luxury of having an extra deck dedicated just for Ghost Reaper. Actually, Flunderies can, so that's cool. But I wouldn't bother main decking this card even if you had like 10 plus targets for it. It'll always be dead against trap decks and Flunderies and these kind of decks in general. Specific video on Ghost Reaper coming up very soon, by the way, so stay tuned. Alright, now we've got the Bestial monsters. Magnamut got a hit to 1, but that doesn't matter too much because the Bestials are still extremely good against tier elements and I can expect them to be way better this format. And the Bestials also have some nice overlap even though again their main applications would be against tier elements. And unlike DD Crow, they're extremely high ceiling when they work because you're also getting a monster on your board. Now speaking of the devil, DD Crow is actually really good in certain instances where the Bestial monsters are useless. For example, against Purely, you can banish their Quickly spell card, or against, I don't know, Unchained, you can banish the Blue Dog. A spell card and a water monster. The Bestial monsters cannot do anything here. Not to mention that you're not summoning a monster on your board, so at least you're not turning on the nasty aspect of Triple Tactic Thrust. I actually recommend everybody to have 3 copies of DD Crow in the side deck because it's actually super generic right now. It's really good against the top 3 best decks, so Unchained, Tearlaments, and Purely. If you have the option between either DD Crow or the Bestials, choose the 3 DD Crows because at least you will be covering more ground. Anyways, next up is Infinite Impermanence, the safest hand trap out there. It's not a monster, so it doesn't lose to Call by the Grave, Triple Tactic Talents, or Thrust, and you can also draw it for turn, and it still can do something. Like, at best, it's a hand trap that really shuts your opponent down, and at worst, it's kind of like a Forbidden Chalice. That's not too bad, huh? And when a game gets really long, at least you can use it to negate stuff like Floodgates when you're setting it, so you can negate Rivalry and Ghosted Match, and that's always nice. The impact of the card is unfortunately kind of low though, because all you're really doing is negating a monster effect until the end phase. That's not the best. But this card's existence cannot be ignored, and it's an extremely popular hand trap, so you have to assume that most of your opponents are likely to hit you with an Infinite Impermanence. Anyways, the best hand trap of this format remains Ash still. Usually this card is just generically good and not super insane, but against the branded based strategies, it is insane. And the reason for that is because branded fusion doesn't really lose to like Valor or Infinite Impermanence too much because it's still sending the materials, but it does full to Ash like crazy. Now, Ash can definitely do a lot and actually be a good replacement for a bunch of cards in your side deck in case you don't want to main deck the card. And I'm saying that because at YCS Cancun, me alongside a lot of other high-level players, we all chose to side deck Ash instead of main decking it because we didn't really know if the card would be good in the main deck in this given format. You know, Latin America is a completely different environment from North America, so we can't really guess what they're about to play. And again, why main deck Ash when you know that people are playing the triple tactic spell cards? But it's still a really good side deck card at the worst case scenario because it's always good against branded based strategies like I said and other kind of decks. So when you've got absolutely nothing, at least you can always count on Ash to be able to cover some ground. I always recommend Ash to be the first hand trap that you consider in any deck when you're trying to play hand traps. There are some exceptions of course, but this usually applies to almost everyone. Anyways, that's all I had for this video, so guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts about what you think are the best hand traps to play in the current format, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Peace.